So let's talk a little bit about role play versus branching scenarios, and what are these two different types of interactions that you can create for a classroom session or a virtual session. When it comes to role play, what we're talking about is live, true to life simulations that forces the learners to say the words that they'd use in a real situation. So in a case study, a lot of times people think, oh, just give me a case study and I'll work through it and we'll try to figure out what we would do in this situation, which gets you conceptually to some critical thinking skills. But with role play, what people are forced to do, and sometimes why people don't like it, is because they are forced to actually say the words that they would say when presented with a similar situation in real life. And then they can get some feedback on that in a practice setting. A branching scenario, on the other hand, is a structured choose your own adventure style narrative. So if you think back to maybe the books that you would have read when you were younger, I certainly read a lot of these books when I went to the book fair or when I brought home an order form for ordering books when I was in school. I would always want to get choose your own adventure books. So choose your own adventure style narrative where each choice leads to specific consequences and a new set of options. So you'll be presented with, for example, well, we're actually going to take a look at an example a little bit later where you're presented with some different choices. And based on what you choose, the story will change or the case study will change. So what I'm going to do, first of all, is when it comes to when should we use each of these different types of activities, let's talk a little bit about that. So there's a few different considerations that we might want to take into account when we're trying to figure out what's the best activity here that can really give me some work on critical thinking skills. And one of the questions that you might want to ask yourself is, how big is your audience? The bigger the audience, the more difficult it is to do role play in a structured way where you can actually see people doing the role play and give people feedback. And so when you have a bigger audience, you might want to turn to other alternative means of developing some critical thinking skills, and branching scenarios can often be one of those ways that goes a little bit beyond just kind of discussions around a case study and has people making some choices and seeing what the consequences of those choices could be. The another question is, how much time do you have? Again, role plays, oftentimes to do it well, you need to give some content. Then you need to give people some time to actually do some of the role plays, and then rotate through the group and then maybe give some feedback. Whereas a branching scenario, that might be something that you're able to do a little bit more quickly, a little bit more cleanly, with a set number of options that people can choose from. Does every group need to be exposed to the exact same information? And if that is the case, then role plays can oftentimes go in lots of different directions. Branching scenarios might be your choice there. And how important is it to feel and or to be on the receiving end of emotions? When you are just taking a look at something that you're reading and making some choices, you don't necessarily have the same emotional connection as you are when you're actually having a dialogue between two different participants. And so that's another thing to take into consideration because, for example, I used to work in the foster care system, and we would have to do a number of different scenarios in training that would help us to kind of simulate the feelings that we might have on a case or that a family member might have and the reaction they might have to some of the choices that we would make. And that was really, really important because when we're working with when we're working interpersonally, oftentimes we need to make sure that we are aware of the emotions that may run through the conversations we can have. All right. So, and then one more big question is, does the success of the task at hand depend more on the learner's logic, which is branching, right? So am I making the right choices, or what consequences do I have from those choices? Or the learner's delivery, because the way that you say things may sometimes be more important than the logic that you're using. So role play might be a bigger or a better option in those situations.